Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're powered by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got a two-part episode. I was planning on this just being a one-parter, talking about the Boston Celtics and how they basically hold all of the cards this offseason. But then the NBA just decided to go fucking crazy on Wednesday, and it ended up being where I had to record an opening portion of this podcast. So given that the biggest news of the day is the D'Angelo Russell and Timofey Mozgov trade for Brook Lopez and the number 27 overall pick, I have brought on Pete Zayas from over at Laker Film Room. He is the host of the Laker Film Room podcast, does a great job. One of my favorite people to follow on Twitter because I think that he does some of the most informative work covering a singular team on the internet. So how's it going, Pete?
I'm doing, man, it's been quite the day, Sam. I wanted to say I'm doing well, but I'm all up in my emotions right now. So.
Yeah, the D'Angelo Russell thing, I think, is a complicated trade more than anything. So the impression that I got from Lakers fans online is one of anger almost. Do you feel angry, or do you feel like just kind of confused and, kind of frustrated almost?
I'm more concerned about what this portends going forward because Magic and Genie basically grew up together, right? So if Magic is not good at this job, is Genie Bus really going to fire him? And so I guess, I took you to point Z before point A with the Russell trade. I have a higher opinion of Russell than most do. He's a very talented player. Yeah, he's definitely the most productive of the young Laker players. I think Sean Marks did a phenomenal job in this trade, and I'm just very concerned that this wasn't followed also by a Paul George trade, because it seems like the type of thing that I feel like Indiana has more leverage over the Lakers now than they did this morning, because the value of this trade is shedding the Mozgov deal, but that really doesn't come to fruition until 2018 free agency. So the immediate value of this is very little unless it helps facilitate that George deal. But obviously that wasn't in their back pocket when they executed this. So I don't know, man. And when I see a guy like Sean Marks, who's one of the brighter young guys, running a team, I wonder if we're the guppy, if we're the shark,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, the fact that Sean Marks is the one that decided to trade for D'Angelo Russell, I think speaks volumes of what D'Angelo's potential is, certainly, even if there are issues that we'll get into in a second here. But before we get into that, I kind of want to have a conversation about just how good D'Angelo is, because I think a lot of people have kind of, I don't want to say like forgotten about him, because he's certainly not a forgettable player due to all of the news he's been in over the course of his first 2 years, but he seems to have gone underrated for what he's done. So I wrote a big thing over at Sporting News about just how productive he has been. He became the first player in NBA history, 20 years old or younger, last season to put up a season of 15 points, 4.5 assists, and 3.5 rebounds per game while playing under 30 minutes per game. If that doesn't work for you, Russell became the third player 20 years old or younger to put up 19 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds per 36 minutes. The other two are LeBron James and Kyrie Irving. That feels pretty good, right? Like, he has been incredibly productive. I understand the concerns in terms of efficiency and the shitty decision-making from time to time and, some of the mental lapses and the maturity issues too. Like, none of this stuff goes unnoticed. It's just, I can't get past the production, I guess, at that age.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir, Sam, and it's like you're trying to make me cry right now. So he's more of a combo guard than he is a straight point guard.
Right.
And last season he was put, the way that Walton structured his rotations is he had a very it was very much separated, the first unit and the second unit, whereas there were no Lakers that averaged 30 minutes per game. That's a common kind of retort that I get when I recite the production from Russell as well. If he was any good, he would have played 30 minutes a game. Well, none of the Lakers did. Jordan Clarkson led the team in minutes, and I think was 95th in the NBA in minutes. So it was a very egalitarian approach by Walton in terms of his rotations, and Russell was very productive within that. Part of that also is that he was with a lineup where the shooting guard and Nick Young and Luol Deng at the 3, that's probably the worst ball handling of any team at the 2 and 3 spots. Now, Randall's a good ball handler for his size, and Mozgov didn't provide anything to that respect. But he carried a disproportionate load as a conventional point guard when that's not really what he is. And that manifested itself in not the greatest assist-to-turnover ratio. It wasn't like he could run off of stagger screens for a lot of catch-and-shoot opportunities with freaking Luol Deng initiating the offense up top. Like, that's who he is. He's a good screener. He's a good cutter. He's a guy who can occupy the ball a little bit, but if you're looking for him to be a conventional 1990s type of point guard, it's just not who he is. Despite all that, Lakers starting lineup of him, Young, Luol Deng, Julius Randle, and Timofey Mozgov, which I think we'd all agree is not one of the better starting lineups in the NBA, they had a plus 5.4 net rating as that 5-man group. When you took Russell out of that, we're talking negative 20, negative 30, no matter who they put in his place. The kid can play. It's to me, this reeks of off the court issues, which is obviously there's a knowledge gap for us. We don't know everything that goes in that's happening behind the scenes. But the Lakers are a 26-win team, Sam. They were not on the verge of winning a title and needed to get rid of a locker room cancer in order to have their chemistry all coalesce. They just traded their leading scorer, their leading assist guy, their leading steals guy, and Sam, they don't have a single guy under contract that shot even the NBA average from three-point range last year.
That's my big concern.
Yeah, Brook Lopez is the best shooter on the team. He's instantly the best shooter on the team. That's crazy.
Yeah, I brought this up in the thing that I wrote, D'Angelo Russell, and I brought it up in the context of his shooting at the rim, which I think is honestly the most important skill for him going forward. Mm-hmm. He made 48.3% of his looks at the rim in the half court this year. I think that some of that is blamed on him just not having a ton of lift, right? But he's still 6'5" and long. So I think that another part of it is just based on the fact that teams were able to pack it in against the Lakers whenever he drove, and he was so crowded that it was so difficult for him to be able to finish. It's a tricky spot for the Lakers now, trying to figure out floor spacing, and that makes me think that they probably know something about Paul George that we don't, but I can't really get behind a deal where you give up this player who's been historically productive for his age, essentially just to get cap space, which is what that is. Brook Lopez is a really good player. He is a much better player than D'Angelo Russell is right now, to be frank. Yes. He is 20 points, 35% from 3, 5 rebounds a game, but his teams always rebound better with him on the floor than when he's off the floor, if you look at the team numbers, because he's such a good box-out player, getting a body on guys and making it easier for his teammates to rebound. Defensively, he at least provides a presence at the rim. He's a really good passer. There's a lot to actually like about Brook Lopez as a player, but you don't acquire him for his play because they're not competing right now. You acquire him for the expiring contract and potentially with the ability to pass him on later, I feel like.
What is the value of making this deal right now as opposed to the trade deadline?
That's my thing too.
Yeah, you'd have to figure that Brooklyn would be just as amenable to it, right? Why not give Alonzo Russell backcourt a shot? I think there's a lot to be said for Lonzo kind of being, you call him a catalyst, which I love, being, catalyzing and putting Russell in a more natural role at the 2 spot. Mm-hmm. I just don't understand the timing of it because the benefit, there's no short-term benefit from it. What, the 27th pick to toss in a Paul George deal? I mean, it ain't done yet. So we'll see. That David Aldridge had a report today that the Kings turned down the Lakers' offer of 2 for 5 and 10, with the Lakers having the idea in mind of flipping one of those picks in a Paul George deal. So, the Lakers currently have one guard on the team under contract in Jordan Clarkson. It's all forwards and bigs. Yeah. And, I mean, obviously, a lot's going to happen in the next 48 hours. Lonzo's probably going to be the pick at number 2. But even then, they're very thin, and they're putting a lot of eggs in one basket, which is in their ability to attract some real monster guys in free agency in 2018.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing here, right? They've clearly traded D'Angelo Russell for cap space in 2018 when LeBron James is going to be a free agent. Like, let's just not sugarcoat this with any other player. This is the Lakers making a statement to LeBron James, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to acquire you and Paul George. You can decide to come here or not, but we're going to make it as difficult as we can for you to say no. And, okay, let's be honest about this, too. Alonzo, Brandon Ingram, Paul George, LeBron James, core 4 is fucking unbelievable and going to be so fun to watch if it happens.
It could be. But, like, to me, like, Brandon Ingram, that's going to be when he's 25 years old or 27 years old. Like, that's when he's really going to be in the spot for that. I mean, I love Lonzo's game, but you're asking a 19-year-old guard to come in, and he'd be going into his second year, right? Ingram into his third, to be the third and fourth guys on a title contender. And because they don't have much flexibility to be doing other things without moving those guys. So
how concerned are you about a trade for those guys now?
I'm concerned about all of it. My biggest fear is that Magic, the tweeter, was going to be Magic, the GM, the guy who had Brandon Knight as the best guy in the draft, and Jahlil Okafor, and you could go on and on about some of the things that he said. And sometimes there are no good guys, and the last Laker front office really, we paid for some of those sins today, right, with shedding the Mozgov contract.
Yeah.
Right, but that doesn't mean that the next guys that come into it are good at their job. And the hiring process with the Lakers is so insular. It's like a mafia family, right? Like, you're either part of the family, you're born with the right last name, or you become a made man after 10 years. So they weren't looking at your Mike Zarins, obviously Sean Marks, but wasn't on the table at that point. But, Sean Marks is exactly the type of guy that, is going to do very well in this league. And those guys aren't even candidates for the Lakers. You have to have a connection and a strong one to get a position of power. And I think the NBA is hard enough as it is, and when you shrink the talent pool, whether it's players or executives, to such a small group of people, you're probably not going to win that game.
Yeah, no, you're 100% right there. You bring up the fact that the old regime essentially is why they're paying for the sins of yesterday today. D'Angelo Russell essentially got traded at 12:01 a.m. on July 1st, 2016. Like, let's just kind of call it what it is, right? Like, Tim Mozgov with that $64 million contract, and then the Luol Deng contract, 4 years, $72 million. That's $136 million of money that should have never been spent. I can't job preservation.
Conversation right now, Sam.
It was full stop job preservation.
Yeah. I've got my hand on my head right now, Sam. You're killing me. Like, yeah. But that's absolutely what happened. That's absolutely what happened. And now you've got a regime that's coming in trying to, not just, fix those sins, but trying to forge ahead in their own manner, through free agency. And that's really, it's a very narrow route. It's a very narrow route to success for this group. Man.
Yeah, it really is. You mentioned Sean Marks. He's done an excellent job with the Nets, by the way. He's done such a good job of building this Nets team out from essentially nothing, from the rubble, to they now have a borderline franchise building block, right? Like a guy that they can center a lot of their decisions around in D'Angelo Russell. They have a guy in Karis LeVert who I think is a really useful player. They're building around the perimeter and their wing players in an era where I think it makes a lot of sense to do that, and I really, really like what Sean Marks has done to this point.
And you got Kenny Atkinson as one of the best player development guys in the NBA to bring it all together. So
also, one of the weirder things about this trade is, to me, do you think that the Nets are saying no if it's pick 22? Like, how do the Lakers not pull pick 22 out of this?
Yeah, like they had the Lakers leveraged on that, I guess.
Yeah, man. What are we doing here? To bring it to a happier note, Mike Dunlap, the former coach of the Charlotte Bobcats, who now is the head coach at Loyola Marymount. What rookies will learn in the NBA? Increased time commitment and intensity, better competition, teammates count, and I quote, "Bear eats you sometimes." I don't know what "bear eats you sometimes" means, but I felt like it was a good transition to talking about this Bobcats Hawks trade, given the fact that he is the former coach of the Charlotte Hornets. I'm sorry, I said Bobcats. Mark Spears reported it as Bobcats initially, and it's filtered through my brain. So this trade is Dwight Howard in the number 31 pick to Charlotte for Marco Bellinelli, Miles Plumlee, and the number 41 overall pick. This trade sounds as ridiculous to you as it did to me, right?
Yeah, it does, and I think it's another instance of just wanting to get a guy out of a locker room. It's in a lot of ways from a what's it going to matter in the playoff standings? It's kind of swishing the mouthwash from one cheek to the other. But I think this is even for all of Dwight's faults, that's a pretty rough deal for the Hawks.
So my biggest question about all of this is, and I think I can kind of answer it, but like this deal is so silly for Atlanta that I just wonder why you wouldn't release him. Like, I know that you have to eat $46 million and that sucks, but like you're going to have to pay, Marco Bellinelli and Miles Plumlee $43 million. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like you're not paying those guys that money for basically zero production in terms of getting you to competitorship and contention. That Miles Plumlee deal is also 1 year longer than Dwight Howard's deal. So you're going to have to essentially eat an extra year of a $12.5 million cap hit. And then you also go down in the draft 10 slots. I do not understand this for Atlanta. I get it for Charlotte, which we can get to in a minute. But like, I genuinely think this is an F grade for Atlanta. Like, I gave the Lakers like a C plus B minus in the trade that we just talked about. And I felt like I was a little bit generous, but like I understood what they were going for and I understood the vision, even if I didn't agree with it. I don't understand the vision. I don't understand anything about this trade from Atlanta's perspective.
Yeah, no, nor do I, and I'm not sure that front office is particularly cohesive right now. I think Budenholzer has had a transition in his role, and this is the time of year though where you really get to see the GMs that are able to take advantage of other guys and leverage them on deals. And but like you said, I can't even find the rationale. And as much as I dislike the Russell Mozgov for Lopez trade, I can understand the rationale, like you said, although disagreeing with it. From Atlanta's perspective, even breaking Dwight up into smaller pieces, which I guess you could say
that's what
those would be,
yeah,
easier to move, I guess. But I really don't see all that much of the value. And it's not like either guy is that young of a prospect to where you can, talk about him like D'Angelo, right? Where, at 21 years old, he's doing this, this, and this. Like, those guys are they are who they are. So it's really hard to find the silver lining for that for Atlanta.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, none of this is, none of these guys are prospects. They're all almost 30, I believe, right? Because Miles Plumlee is older than what most people think he is because he got into the NBA at 23. Like, he's a good 28, 29 years old. Yeah, I think that the idea of breaking up that contract into a smaller piece in Miles Plumlee, essentially, they probably think they can move that down the road. I think it's going to be tougher. I thought it was going to be tough for the Bucks to move that deal, and they moved it. I thought it would be tough for Charlotte to move that deal. They moved it. I think it's going to be tough for Atlanta to move that deal, to be honest. They do at least save $4 million in like actual money, which I guess is why they didn't just flat out cut him. But I would rather I'd rather kill the $4 million over the course of 3 years and not have the $12.5 million cap hit and have the 10 slot higher pick than, have to save money and do this. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, right there with you.
Yeah, so Dwight Howard, I think, is actually an interesting fit in Charlotte. Steve Clifford and he have a relationship going back to their days in Orlando. Clifford helped get the best out of Dwight Howard, to be sure. Clifford's defenses over the years have actually been really solid despite having immobile big men, and that's a big problem for Dwight now. The problem is that the back has just totally sapped any sort of mobility that he once had to kill pick and rolls. I don't hate the deal from Charlotte's perspective because they're just eating money over the course of 2 years instead of 3 years. And that'll be nice to get the Miles Plumlee deal off of their back and to get a 10-slot higher pick. But, I think that Charlotte is probably, if there's a team, I'll say this, if there's a team that can get the most out of Dwight Howard remaining in the NBA, it's probably Charlotte because of the Steve Clifford connection.
I thought Atlanta was going to be Dwight's kind of last chance as a prominent player in the NBA. Yeah. And Clifford was actually on the Lakers staff. I believe it was the year that Dwight was here, but it may have been the year before. But I do know that there's a relationship between the two. So, it's amazing, kind of how far and how quickly Dwight has fallen from grace in terms of NBA perception. But I do think that Clifford and his defensive scheme, especially, like you said, it's probably the best fit. But even then, I'm skeptical on how impactful he's going to be able to be.
Yeah, they tried it with Roy Hibbert this year, and it didn't work. And Dwight's certainly better than Roy, don't get me wrong, but, you're right. I don't know how effective this is going to be.
Yeah.
All right, Pete, do you have anything else you want to talk about? I feel like those are the two big things that, have happened over the course of the day. I don't want to get into the Kristaps Porzingis thing because I think it's just totally ridiculous.
Yeah.
I just don't think they're going to trade him. Jimmy Butler, I talked about yesterday. Paul George, we hit on the podcast already. Anything else that you want to talk about here?
No, Sam, I'm just going to go drink heavily. So thank you for having me on.
Pete, of course, tell the people where they can find your work.
Yes, sir. So on my YouTube channel, Laker Film Room, LakerFilmRoom.com, and you can follow me on Twitter at Laker Film Room as well.
Pete is, like I said, one of my favorites. He really does a creative job covering an organization that, it just has an insane flood of coverage every year, but his coverage is totally unique, and I really enjoy it. This has been the first part of the Game Theory podcast. We're going to be back with Jay King from over at masslive.com. Does a great job covering the Boston Celtics. I talked to him for an hour about where Boston is going at this stage and what they're kind of doing and how they hold all of the cards this offseason. But first, we also talked about David Griffin getting fired by the Cleveland Cavaliers, essentially, and how ridiculous and stupid that is. So it's just an outrage podcast today. It is a fun podcast. I hope that you guys enjoy it. Here is that second part of the show with Jay King. We're here with Jay King to talk about the Boston Celtics and the team basically who holds all of the cards this offseason, it seems like. Whatever Boston does is going to be the key. That's why I saved them for last. But the first thing we're going to talk about here is the Cleveland Cavaliers have just, really it was just announced by Brian Windhorst that David Griffin is not going to be returning to the Cleveland Cavaliers as their general manager. Adrian Wojnarowski just reported that Chauncey Billups is expected to emerge as a candidate for this job. This is all just a fucking train wreck, it feels like. Jay, before we get into Boston, I want to talk about this because I've been very outspoken about just generally how dumb it would be to me that this could happen. What are your first thoughts that David Griffin is not going to be the general manager of the Cleveland Cavaliers?
My first thoughts are that despite all the rumblings you heard throughout the season, it was still difficult to believe that the GM of a team that has reached the finals now 3 straight times was not going to return to the team that he helped to build. And when you look at what the Cavaliers did, what really could Griffin have done differently? You could argue that the Kevin Love for Andrew Wiggins trade they shouldn't have done, but LeBron forced them into that. There was no choice there.
They won a title with Kevin
They won
Love.
A title against a 73-win team, and then they ran into that same team with Kevin Durant on it and lost predictably. I don't know. It's just crazy to the two sides couldn't make this work because I thought Griffin did really good work there, filling out the rest of that roster once LeBron decided to return. And obviously the Cavaliers have experienced a whole lot of success lately, and like there's not much else they can do. Like there are all these reports that they're interested in Jimmy Butler and Paul George. It's like unless they give up a piece of their core, they don't really have any assets to move. And you can blame Griffin for that, but he was in a position where he had to use all of his future assets to go out and round out the rest of his roster because they had a window right now. There's no promise LeBron James is going to stay as brilliant as he is forever. So I don't know. It's just crazy to me. It's nuts. And the Chauncey Billups thing is hilarious because I think he's a really sharp guy. I think he'll probably do a really good job in the front office. He has no experience. And to me, like hiring a dude with no experience in a championship situation is when he's going to need a ton of creativity to navigate their situation is probably a little misguided.
So, yeah, I mean, at Vice in the middle of May, I think, I wrote an article and a column essentially saying the Cavs need to extend David Griffin yesterday. They should have ponied up whatever the fuck it took to get David Griffin under contract. And the reason that I say that is if you look at all the moves that he's made to round out this roster. So let's kind of just dive into this, right? So he ends up getting Channing Frye from Orlando, I believe it was, right? And within that deal, it ended up being like a 3-team trade where they trade Anderson Varejao to Portland to create like this trade exception. So they end up finding a way to create an asset out of thin air with this trade exception, right, from a team that might be willing to dump salary. They end up, trying to get Mike Dunleavy. The Mike Dunleavy thing didn't end up working out, but it was just like the craziest thing in order to like get this thing done. They had to, get really creative. So they create a sign and trade with Matthew Dellavedova, create another trade exception and take Mike Dunleavy into the trade exception to, again, get him essentially for free. Then they end up getting Kyle Korver for that Mike Dunleavy, who they essentially got for free, as well as a first-round pick. But it wasn't as simple as just the first-round pick. He negotiated a move to trade first-round pick for first-round pick in 2018 and 2019 so that they would be able to satisfy the Stepien rule to be able to get Atlanta a first-round pick a little bit quicker so that they'd be willing to trade Kyle Korver to them. That's not shit that, like, all but like 5 general managers in the NBA can do. Like, not enough general managers really have like, I'm not going to say that necessarily, but like not all general managers in the NBA necessarily have that kind of wherewithal and an understanding of the collective bargaining agreement. And David Griffin has clearly portrayed himself to be this awesome negotiator of trades and an awesome, executive that understands the minutia of the CBA. He's also proven himself to be a fucking saint in terms of like dealing with the amount of scrutiny that comes with this and dealing with the media and dealing with what is essentially being the architect of a roster that he gets no credit for building, right? Like this is all like anyone who is in the general public talks about with like LeBron James is the general manager of this team. No, he's not. Like all of the shit that I just talked about right there, LeBron James wouldn't be able to do that. That's David Griffin understanding the way that, trades work and the way that shit works in an NBA front office. So that kind of stuff bothers me. I talk to, NBA executives pretty regularly. All of them say that Griff is like one of the absolute best in their industry, like one of the 5 to 10 best. I hear people say he's in the top 3. I hear people say he's in the top 10, something like that. Like he is unbelievable. And to go out and like not offer that guy whatever he asks for is incredibly risky and incredibly dumb to me. Now, let's say this also. It's possible that David Griffin was asking for the moon and didn't want to sign a long-term extension necessarily because he knows LeBron James is a questionable or has a questionable future in Cleveland, right? Like that is entirely a possibility here, that this isn't just a Cleveland Cavaliers move. Having said that, they damn well better have made a very competitive offer to David Griffin or else this is just batshit insane to me.
It really is crazy. Like, what else does the guy need to do? There's very little that he could have done with that roster on top of what he did already. And like you said, like some of those trades were very creative, and that's the type of creativity they're going to need to add to their roster in the future, because they're going to need to add to their roster to compete with Golden State. That's very clear. And like I said, Chauncey, like, again, really smart guy, but hasn't had any experience, and certainly because of that, hasn't shown the ability to navigate the fringes of the CBA like Griffin has. This is a stunner. So even though it was the most obvious, like everyone knew this was coming, it's still a stunner.
So like what I'll say is about Chauncey is this: like I think Chauncey actually will be a pretty good, like general manager, a pretty good NBA front office person. The reason is like he's from, like, you talk to people around the NBA, like he has like some sort of say. I don't know like what it is exactly, like what the scenario is. Like he talks to the Denver front office like pretty regularly. I don't know if it's like exactly like he has a role or if he's a consultant or something along those lines, but like, he like has a fairly like he's been dealing with front office work for a while, I would say is the best way to put it. And everyone has given him like kind of sterling reviews in terms of this future as a general manager. And I get that, but you also have a guy here in David Griffin who has shown himself to be successful in the very specific way that you need him to be successful. And I don't know. I mean, like, who knows what the LeBron camp had to do with this? Who knows what, the Dan Gilbert part had to do with this? One thing that I will say, though, is this. Dan Gilbert, and this was a point brought up by Nate Duncan on Twitter just like immediately after, and I think Nate absolutely nailed this. Dan Gilbert absolutely fucked David Griffin here, because David Griffin could have gone to Atlanta. He could have gone to Orlando. He could have gone to Milwaukee, and Milwaukee had the worst like executive search, it seems like, in years upon years at this stage, given the fact they passed over Justin Zanuck, lost out on Arturas Karnisovas, interviewed 5 other guys, and ended up with John Horst, who not a lot of people know a whole lot about. The fact that like they would have, I feel confident they would have interviewed David Griffin, and I would have found it hard to believe that David Griffin wouldn't have gotten a job dealing with one of the most up-and-coming organizations in the NBA in Milwaukee. That would have been a perfect spot for him. And the fact that this meandered on and meandered on and meandered on until the day after Milwaukee hires their general manager, it's just all fucked. Like, I don't like anything about this from any perspective.
And it makes you think it wasn't a Griffin decision. Like you were saying, maybe he had part of it and maybe he was asking for the moon. But the fact that he stayed in negotiations for as long as he did, and we're assuming that he just found out, like the rest of us, that he won't be returning to the Cavaliers. But like the fact that it lasted this long and they didn't come to this conclusion until now, like that makes you think the Cavaliers were behind this, and otherwise he would have done it earlier, right? And gone out and try to get another job, or maybe he just wants a break for a little while. He's dealt with LeBron, he's dealt with all the drama of the Cavaliers, and he wants a break. But man, you're right. Like Milwaukee would have been a really good spot for him. He's such a sharp guy. Everyone you talk to says he's one of the sharpest. Obviously, his track record speaks for that. Just a wild move. Yeah,
it's just a weird thing, I guess. Like, just couldn't agree on future is the quote that Adrian Wojnarowski has. And I get it, I guess. I mean, it's a very up-in-the-air future after next season. Let's talk about the Boston Celtics, given the fact that that's the team that you cover pretty regularly. A lot going on this weekend, right, Jay? Decent amount that went down.
Totally insane. So we were talking about this before recording the show. I hardly ever step away from my computer, but one of my college roommates was back from Africa for literally just for this weekend. So I figure, it's a week before the draft. It's a safe time to get away. Nobody ever trades the number one pick the weekend before the draft. I think the last time it happened was 1993.
It's the Chris Webber move, right?
Yeah. So I decided to go away for one weekend to visit my friend who was back for one weekend from Africa for his 30th birthday. So I bring my computer, of course, just in case. And I worked almost the whole weekend. And so Saturday night, I finally decided, screw it. I'm giving the baton to Tom Westerholm, who also covers the Celtics for MassLive.com, where I work. And I say, it's yours. I'm going to this party. Whatever happens, you'll write about it tonight. And if anything happens, it was like 10 o'clock on a Saturday night when I did that. like half an hour later, David Aldridge reports the agreement has been done. The Celtics are trading the number one pick. And it's funny because people who follow my stuff know, like, I'm very rarely away, but whenever I am, the Celtics make a trade. Like when they traded David Lee, I was hiking Donut Falls in Utah, and it was like the first time in probably 3 years, other than being on an airplane, that I didn't have cell phone service at all. It's like a long history of everything that happens. It's like the very rare times when I'm off the grid entirely, and that was one of the times. So shout out to Tom, who handled it very well, but the timing of it was weird, and the timing of it couldn't have been worse for me.
Yeah, no, man. It's just like I don't even know. It always works out that way because, like you, I was on my way to hang out with my roommate in the past, who I had not seen in probably 6 or 7 months, right? And my girlfriend and I were going to go out. We were literally walking down the road here down to Sunset. We were going to this new spot called the Electric Owl. Pretty good drinks, I will say that. It was a nice night. Have the first drink. Boom. David Aldridge tweet. Boom. Adrian Wojnarowski tweet. Boom. Shout out Derek fucking Bodner for getting the scoop on what the pick protections were. So it was just a crazy, crazy night. I get back. I have I stopped drinking after like the first drink and a half or whatever. I'm just like, all right, I'm going to have to work here. I'm up until 2 o'clock Pacific time, 5 o'clock Eastern time, updating my mock draft over at Seth Davis's site, writing like a 2,000-word breakdown of the trade over at the Sporting News. It was just one of those nights where everything seems like it's going to be nice. I can take a night off before this week. Boom. Never fails. Just totally.
Never.
The plans get fucked and you're in hell.
and what a crazy trade, man. Like, I get the feeling behind it for the Celtics, assuming they don't think Fultz is a transcendent pick, which obviously they don't. And obviously they feel differently about Fultz than a lot of guys who they think there are other comparable talents at number 3. And then they get, a future first rounder, which will probably be in the lottery from either the Lakers, Philly, or Sacramento. So I get why they made the risk. I also think it's possible the risk turns out very poorly for them. So We'll see.
Yeah, no, I agree, definitely. I think that ultimately what this came down to, and I've talked about this on some podcast at some point. I don't remember which one at this stage, but I've talked about it on your podcast as well, which will be coming out before this one. This trade, it ultimately comes down to the fact that the Celtics, well, really just Danny Ainge, because Danny Ainge is the one that makes all the calls there. Danny Ainge did not end up believing that Markelle Fultz is a transcendent talent as compared to the others. He believes that Markelle Fultz is in the same kind of tier as the rest of the top 4 prospects in this draft: Josh Jackson, Jason Tatum, and Lonzo Ball. I'm sorry. Lonzo Ball looks like is going to go number 2 at this stage to the Los Angeles Lakers. And that's going to leave number 3. I don't think it was as certain when this deal was consummated late last week and going into the weekend that the Lakers were going to take Lonzo at number 2. That makes me believe that whenever you're talking about trading down from number 1 to number 3, you damn well better be sure that you're going to get the guy you like. And given some reporting from Adam Himmelsbach over the weekend that the fact that, the backcourt strength of the Boston Celtics played a role in them ending up deciding to move on from Markelle Fultz, that makes me think this deal is down to Josh Jackson and Jason Tatum. I just don't think that you can make this trade from number 1 to number 3 when they decided to make it if there's a chance that Josh Jackson goes number 2. So I think that Jason Tatum is the guy at number 3. I don't know that for sure. You talk to people around the NBA, they have differing opinions. Some people will talk to you about how Josh Jackson is the Danny Ainge player. And he absolutely is. He looks like everything that Danny Ainge values in talent. He can't shoot. He's athletic as shit. He's a motherfucker competitor. Everything that Danny Ainge loves, that is Josh Jackson. Then there's Jason Tatum on the other hand, though. You'll get the logical kind of explanation that I just laid out. And then you'll also get, Jason Tatum, from our intel or whatever, from conversations with them. They really like Jason. Ultimately, it's going to come down to Danny. Who knows? So, you get both sides of it. I think it's going to be Jason Tatum. I understand people who think it's going to be Josh Jackson. But what it comes down to for me is that they have just evaluated Markelle Fultz very differently than what anyone else has. And that's kind of fascinating to me.
Yeah, and they're putting themselves out there because of the way everybody else has valued Markelle Fultz. If they're wrong in this one, then they're the only people who were wrong because most people around the NBA believe Markelle Fultz is the guy in this draft. And, you look at Jonathan Givony, who tweeted the other night when the trade reports first emerged, there's a big drop-off from 1 to 3. I know you believe the same way. Kevin O'Connor was banging the trade down drum. But I think of the draft experts I trust the most, he was probably the only one who thought that the top prospects were pretty similar, and the only one who didn't feel that Fultz was on another level than the other guys behind him, the 3 that you mentioned in Ball, Jackson, and Tatum. So the Celtics are sticking their neck out and saying, you know what? We think we're going to get a similar caliber prospect 2 picks later, and we'll also pick up another lottery pick to add to our stash of them, and we'll be happy with that. And the problem for them will be if Fultz becomes a superstar, which he very well could, and whoever they pick doesn't. And Ainge is fearless, man. Ainge is just, he doesn't give a damn about what public perception is. We saw it when he picked Jaylen Brown at number 3, and everybody booed him. We've seen it now when he traded. And I was talking about on my podcast recently how the Celtics have been very risk averse throughout their rebuild, and they haven't made any really questionable trades. They haven't made any crazy decisions. This was probably the riskiest thing that they've done, and I say probably, this is definitely the riskiest thing they've done in the last 4 years. The only thing that would have been comparable was the Justice Winslow trade they tried to pull off a couple of years ago that they fell shy of. So when Ainge falls in love with a guy, he can fall in love pretty hard, as we saw with Winslow, and maybe he's fallen in love with one of these other guys, whether it's Tatum or Jackson. At the very least, he did not fall in love with Markelle Fultz. That is very clear. Yeah,
for sure. And, Chris Mannix wrote a really good piece over the weekend over at Yahoo. He wrote that this is a legacy-defining trade for Danny Ainge. You talk to everyone around the NBA, maybe not necessarily fans, but you talk to other executives, you talk to people who work in the industry. Danny Ainge is widely respected. He is considered to be one of the best general managers in the business. And I want to believe in him on some level. The words that kept getting used whenever I talked to people around the NBA was, Danny, I am sure, is playing chess versus checkers. This is not a simple move for him. He has other pieces and other moves coming down the pike. I don't know what they are. And to make this deal, I think you need some level of certainty that you can get better. I don't know that that's there, I guess. I'm just not like this. We can talk about the second pick that they get, right? there were second picks here with, the Lakers 2018 pick or the Kings 2019 pick. I can see a situation where the Lakers are easily the 6th or 7th worst team in the NBA, and this defaults to the Kings in 2019, which is 2 years away. You don't get the asset for 2 more years, and the Kings may or may not be better or worse than what they are now. We don't know what the Kings are going to look like in 2 years because they have $1 billion in cap space, and they have a bunch of young talent. What if that young talent takes a leap? I don't know. It's always a safe bet to bet against the Kings.
Buddy Hield for MVP 2019.
Really, yeah. Like it's always a safe bet to bet against the Kings, but they at least have a direction now. So maybe it's not a safe bet to bet against the Kings. I don't know. I really don't know. It's a really tricky spot.
Yeah, although the Kings' direction seems to be kind of staying young and staying and going with the youth movement, which normally takes more than a couple years. Even the great collections of young talent, like the Oklahoma City Thunder, when they put those guys together, they were really bad for 2 years, like really, really bad for 2 years before putting it all together. We see it with the Timberwolves; they're really, really bad even this past year, and they haven't turned the corner like many expected they would last year. So it takes a while when you have young guys for them to figure out how to win, and the Celtics are banking on that. Because they're banking on at least one of the 3 teams. It takes a while, whether it's the Lakers, whose pick could go to Boston in 2018, or the Kings and or Sixers, either of whom's pick could go to Boston in 2019. So all they need is one of those teams to be really bad and not get the number 1 overall pick over the next couple of years, and then this trade could work out really well. But there's also a downside to it, and that downside, like I said, is if Fultz becomes a motherfucker. You've been cussing on this podcast, so I had to throw that in there.
Dude, I don't care if people cuss. Like I am happy to allow it.
I'm kind of disappointed you didn't drop any F-bombs on my podcast.
I didn't know if I was allowed. It's always tricky for me there. I should have asked beforehand if I was allowed to curse.
Let it fucking fly next time, man.
I feel like the Boston fans would have appreciated it more if I would have just let it fly.
They would have fucking loved you.
Oh, man. So we've kind of talked about number 3 at this stage. I think it's pretty impossible to go further than we have now without talking about like the elephant in the room that is Gordon Hayward. Gordon Hayward, you talk to people around the NBA, around the league, different players, different executives, and the feeling seems to be in Boston's favor. There have been reports out there that Miami will be seriously considered. Utah will obviously get a meeting. Utah, of course, if he signs a 1-year deal, can give him a shot at making All-NBA and making about $1 billion next year. There is just a lot of kind of factors that could go into Gordon Hayward's deal. Having said that, Boston does apparently appeal to him in some way. What do you think about the Gordon Hayward potential addition to the Celtics and what direction they should go here?
I mean, I think you obviously have to chase him. I think if you don't get him, you should chase Blake Griffin, although I'd be very nervous about his injury history. The thing with the Celtics is they have this window of cap space that's only available for this year. Because of the contract situations, that cap space is not going to push forward into next year. It's not like they can sit there with the same roster and punt that cap space toward next year because it's not going to be available. So there's a window right now for them to add a great player or at least a very good player, depending on how you think about those 2 guys right now, and do it without losing any of their prized assets. So, yes, absolutely, they go after Gordon Hayward. Absolutely, I think if they whiff on him, they should go after Blake Griffin. The thing is, I think Blake probably is, I would say, more likely to leave, I would guess, than Gordon Hayward, and that's with no inside information. I just think looking at the Clippers, they've kind of maxed out.
Well, and I can kind of take the reins from here and take the baton. So, like not David Griffin. I'm sorry, I still have David Griffin on the mind. Blake Griffin. The theory here is that it's questionable whether or not he and Chris Paul will want to continue together. Right? I mean, I don't think that that's really breaking news or anything. And both of them can get the most money from the Los Angeles Clippers. Chris Paul because he can get the 5-year deal with the All-NBA attachment, and Blake because he can get the 5-year deal without the All-NBA attachment. So how do you kind of rectify the fact that both guys, I think, realistically do want to stay there, but may not want to continue the organizational stasis and status quo that has infiltrated them and now has them losing in the first round to the Utah Jazz? I think that's a really tricky concept, right? Having said that, I don't know if Boston makes sense for Blake, because I think Blake's best spot at this stage is like as a small ball 5. And if you can't really close with him as a small ball 5, as the Celtics can't because of Al Horford, or I mean, like, really, you could close with Blake and sit Al Horford on the bench as a small ball 5. But like, I don't know, man. Like, it's, to me, the Blake thing doesn't really make a whole lot of sense.
I think very differently about that. I think one, his rebounding would be immensely critical for the Celtics. I think two, Griffin and Horford would be unbelievable passing duo, maybe the best passing duo in the front court in the NBA right away. And in Brad Stevens' offense, where the big men are used as playmakers, that's huge. I think Griffin and Horford, because of the fact that they can both shoot threes and because of the fact that they can both move their feet a little, I think they can both hold up on both ends of the court against smaller lineups. And obviously, when you're talking about the greatest basketball in the world, whether it's the Warriors or the Cavs, there's always going to be some concern about whether you can hold up against their small lineups. But I think those guys fit well together. I think Blake, assuming health, would be a really good fit. So I think differently there. I still think Gordon Hayward needs to be the number one target. And that's because he's safe. And he doesn't come with the same health concerns. He's the type of scorer the Celtics need. They need more size on the wing. He would give them that. He does a little bit of everything, and I think next to Isaiah Thomas, they would have two high volume, high efficiency scorers, which would be dynamite for their offense, especially with Al Horford, who's like this perfect complementary piece, who wasn't always needed as a complementary piece last year. So I think Hayward is the number one target. I think that's obvious. I think the problem for them is Utah's got a good situation too. And it's possible he decides to leave. It's possible he looks at the rest of the Western Conference and thinks Utah will never reach the top of the mountain. It's possible he looks at the Boston and thinks they have a better chance of reaching the finals and winning titles, which I do believe is true. But also, like, it's tough to leave a young core that's experienced a tiny bit of success this past year and has quality pieces in Rudy Gobert, in a lot of the other guys they have, and a really good coach in Quinn Snyder, who Hayward has actually been with longer than he was with Brad Stevens in college. So to me, like, yes, you try to alert Gordon Hayward. I'm not sure if it works. I do think the Celtics are the obvious team, the obvious threat there. Then people will talk about Miami, and Pat Riley is always threatening. But I think the Celtics, assuming he leaves, that's probably the most logical fit for him.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree. And if they do end up with Gordon Hayward, I think they should be making a realistic push toward trading for a Jimmy Butler, for really trying to get to that next level in the Eastern Conference and competing with the Cleveland Cavaliers, who right now are, as we speak, a fucking dumpster fire, but still have LeBron James and still have Kyrie Irving, and for now, still have Kevin Love on the roster. So even though there's about a billion different things of organizational discord going on, where they've also fired Trent Redden for some reason, there is still reason to believe that the Celtics are far enough away from Cleveland that they need two guys, not just one, to beat the Cavaliers.
Yeah. And then, like we were talking about on my podcast, the risk there would be putting together this really good team that then costs a ton of money and still can't get by either LeBron James and the Cavs or the Golden State Warriors. And so whatever, if the Celtics do try to load up now and do get one of those free agents and one of the stars who will be available this summer, whether it's Butler, George, or whoever else, it's still not an automatic that they would be able to compete for NBA championships or win NBA championships at the very least. So and then it could be a huge tax bill on top of that for ownership. So either way, the Celtics choose, there are risks. If they turn toward the future, maybe you're passing on the chance to get a guy like Jimmy Butler, who was probably a top 10 player in the NBA this past season, or Paul George, who's 6'10" and long and can guard LeBron James and can do so many things. Mm-hmm. So I think there's upside to building a team right now, and getting that. And I do think, especially if they succeed in free agency, that they'll be more likely to go out and get another player and see what happens, see how much they can achieve with the current roster. But there's also downside to that because of how much money it would cost, and because you'd still be up against the mighty Cavs and the mighty Warriors, and you'd be giving up valuable future assets to build a team that will cost a lot in the short term and might not ultimately hang another banner. So Danny Ainge, he's done everything right for 4 years, and the prize for that in the NBA, unless you get super lucky like the Warriors did, or super lucky to have LeBron James on your team, the prize for that in the NBA is sometimes, well, here you have a million other tough decisions laying in front of you.
The prize for a lot of great decisions.
Business, man.
Yeah, the prize for a lot of great decisions is making more and more tough decisions as you get further and further up the ladder. It's fucking crazy. And like as you say that, like Zach Lowe just tweeted, Cavs will now go back to previous plan of winning lottery multiple times and having generational NBA stars born nearby. Like, that's 100% right. Like, the Celtics have gone about building this in the absolute best way possible. And Cleveland, got really, really lucky. And I think it's, worth saying that they got really lucky, and they were bad for a lot of years and then ended up getting LeBron James back. But, like, this shit is incredibly hard when you're Danny Ainge. This job is incredibly hard, and it just leads to more and more tough decisions down the road. Let's move on. Let's kind of stop talking about potential Celtics players and talk more about actual Celtics players, I guess. The Avery Bradley situation is fascinating to me.
Yep.
Because he really, to me, he got nicked up midway through the year, but before that, he really looked like he had taken a leap forward offensively, particularly with the way he was handling the ball and being able to create his own shot. What is your impression of what they should do with Avery Bradley? Because he has 1 year at $8 million left on his contract. He's going to get real expensive real soon, and I feel like that's a good thing because he's really good, but also a bad thing because they have to figure out what to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, the problem with Avery Bradley being up for a new contract isn't just that it's him alone that you're going to have to pay. It's at the same time, Isaiah Thomas and Marcus Smart are both going to be due for new contracts, and both of those guys are going to get paid a lot more money than they currently do. So that's the issue there. And, I do believe that they'll end up committing to Isaiah Thomas. I think he's done enough. I think unless they decide to pivot fully toward the future or more fully toward the future, then Isaiah Thomas is the best player on their team, and they'll want to keep him around. So then you have a decision. Do you keep Marcus Smart and pay him? Do you keep Avery Bradley and pay him? I tend to think that Avery Bradley right now is more valuable than Marcus Smart, but Marcus Smart could become more valuable in the future and he's going to be a restricted free agent versus Avery Bradley, who will be unrestricted. So there's a difference in value because of that. I don't know what I would do if I were them. Because of the salary cap restraints, and they may need to move one of them this summer to clear space for a maximum free agent to go after one of the trade targets. to build the roster they have now. So it's a decision that's coming quickly, and that's another one of the super important decisions that Ainge will face really soon. I don't envy him either, because those are two valuable guys. Like, Marcus Smart's a great defender who can guard three positions and give you playmaking from the point guard, although obviously he's a dreadful shooter. And Avery Bradley isn't the same type of playmaker, but he's become a knockdown shooter, and he can guard ones, and he's become much better at guarding twos and guarding in the post. So he's a valuable guy too. So those guys both have value, but the Celtics are probably going to have to move on from it, at least one of them.
Right, like Avery Bradley is probably a $20 million player on the market. Like, full stop. Like, he will make $20 to $25 million on his next contract per season. And that's a really difficult pill to swallow, I think, if you're Boston. Michael Pina, my pseudo colleague over at Vice, he suggested trading him to Minnesota. He suggested for the number 7 overall pick. I think that Minnesota would be crazy to trade the number 7 overall pick for Avery Bradley unless they were able to renegotiate an extension with him. I think that a trade might make the most sense, though. I do like the fit with Minnesota. I like the fit in Philadelphia. I like a lot of different fits for Avery Bradley. He's a really easy player to find kind of a spot for, right? And I would venture that makes the most sense for Boston at this stage. I know that he could be a very valuable contributor on their team next season. It's tough, though, for me to really, try and figure out what direction they're going to go.
Especially when you look at their flaws, which in this past season, size had a lot to do with that. And it's tough when you're starting Isaiah Thomas, who's 5'9", and Avery Bradley, who, for all of his defensive talent, is 6'2".
Yep.
And then sometimes you're playing Marcus Smart at the 3, and Al Horford, who doesn't rebound at all, is going to be in their front court. So they need more size, they need more physicality, and a lot of the guys they could target are on the wing, which makes you think, Avery Bradley, maybe he'll be expendable. I don't know. Those are really tough decisions, because obviously Avery Bradley is a valuable player. He does a lot of skills that you need. I thought he was really good in the playoffs. He had toward the end of the Bull series, he played better than Jimmy Butler. There were games early in the Washington series where he outplayed Bradley Beal. He's a really good player, which is why he's going to command all that money. And oddly, that's kind of why the Celtics might have to trade him.
Yeah.
And again, if they do convince a free agent to sign with them, one of the top guys, they're going to need to clear cap space. And Avery Bradley could be one of the guys that they have to sacrifice to do that.
Yeah, and they could get very legitimate value for Avery, even though he's on a contract that only runs 1 year. Let's talk about Isaiah Thomas. I kind of mentioned on your podcast that if they're unable to sign Gordon Hayward, because they're 2 players away, not just 1 player away, in my opinion, I would be looking elsewhere. I would be considering all offers for Isaiah Thomas this summer while he is on a $6 million contract before I have to pay him $30 to $35 million next season. Where are you at with Isaiah Thomas and the potential for a trade?
I believe that, there's always the potential, and I do think, there are ways this could spin for the Celtics where they'll end up pivoting toward the future and decide that, there's nothing we like enough right now to use our assets on, and they'll look around and say, we're still not contenders. Let's try to build around Jaylen Brown. Let's try to build around this year's number 3 pick. Let's try to build around the Brooklyn Nets pick from next year and the Lakers pick maybe from next year, and see what happens. So yeah, I do think there's a possibility that they'll consider Isaiah Thomas trade. The other side of that, and where I tend to lean, is Isaiah Thomas just had one of the most ridiculous offensive seasons in NBA history. Like what he did this past year, he was awesome. He was fantastic. And there are concerns that maybe at his size, he won't if he loses a step, he won't be as effective. And people say, small guards don't hold up late into their careers. Well, if you look at it, there's no small guard who has ever been like Isaiah Thomas.
Yeah.
It's hard to say small guards don't age well because guys his size have never done what he's done. He's the first sub-6-footer to make All-NBA team since 1955. It's ridiculous what he's done, and like Allen Iverson, I would say is the closest comparison, right? And Allen Iverson had 33 points a game into his 30s, and he had already played 34,000 minutes when he did that. Isaiah Thomas has played 13,000 minutes. Now, obviously, there's the hip injury, which he says shouldn't be a long-term issue, which he said doctors told him that. And if that's really not an issue, then I think there's optimism that he will age well because Iverson didn't take care of his body like Isaiah Thomas does. Iverson was very much someone who had some bad habits, and so I do think there's a bit of optimism that Isaiah Thomas, more than other guys, because he can shoot the ball so well, because of how well he takes care of his body, because of the minimal wear and tear on his body from the 13,000 minutes only that he's played in the NBA, which is the benefit really of being considered a sixth man and doubted his whole career. I do think there's real optimism that he still has many, 4 or 5 at least, great years left. And if he does, I think you'd be stupid to trade him unless you get overwhelmed and you decide to pivot toward the future. And then, if you do that, do you trade Al Horford? Do you, what other moves do you make to go in that future direction? How strongly do you pivot in that direction? So I do think ultimately that's a decision the Celtics could make. I don't think they should be at that place right now, especially before they go out and try to sign a free agent and go out and look at what trades they could make. And I also think the other part to this is if you are trying to build this super team that can compete with Golden State, and you ever do want to go out and use all those assets, consolidate them to get the next amazing player, and I'm not talking about a Paul George or Jimmy Butler, I'm talking about amazing, like an Anthony Davis or Russell Westbrook or somebody whose situation could theoretically fall apart over the next 2 or 3 years. If you do go out and get one of those guys, you're going to need to convince them to re-sign. And to convince them to re-sign, you're going to need to have players like Isaiah Thomas. So that's another layer to it, and another thing that Danny Ainge has to consider. And as I said, GMing's tough, man. GMing is so damn tough.
Building an NBA team seems difficult. There's not really another way to put it. Isaiah Thomas, the way he's going to age is going to be fascinating, as a just general thing to watch. Because, as you said, no other small guard has really accomplished what Isaiah Thomas has accomplished, at least sub-6-foot guard. Players, the way that I have been explained it by people who work in the NBA, around the NBA, they're cognizant of how different it is now for players in how they take care of their bodies. And they're starting to wonder if the traditional aging curve is a little bit different. And it's not the same as it used to be where, once a point guard hits 30 or 31 years old, there's a significant drop-off. They're starting to wonder if, like you mentioned, it could be 2 or a couple more years beyond that take, that take time for the drop-off. So I kind of agree. I don't think they're going to trade Isaiah, by the way. Full stop. I do not think they will consider this. I think that the Markelle Fultz move to get rid of him spelled that they are likely going to give Isaiah Thomas whatever he needs in free agency, right? That just makes sense.
Although I'm not sure you make that decision at the top of the draft because of that. And I say that for 2 reasons. One, I think at the top of the draft, you just pick the best player. And if you think that's Markelle Fultz, you take him. Doesn't matter roster fit, doesn't matter whatever. You take him, you make it work, and that's the way it is. So, and 2, I think if they did take Markelle Fultz, I think that could have really worked. I think Markelle Fultz has potential to be great off the ball, and I think Isaiah Thomas is already great off the ball. Where the questions would be defensively, and I think Markelle Fultz has a long way to go there. And obviously Isaiah Thomas, for all he tries and all the effort he gives, he's always going to have limitations because of his height. So that's where you would have questions. And I think defensively, like any prospect who comes in, or most prospects who come in, are going to have defensive issues at that stage of their career. But so I'm not sure that signifies they're like fully committed to Isaiah Thomas. I do think they are fully committed to Isaiah Thomas. I do think they will keep Isaiah Thomas. I think they'd kind of be crazy not to, unless, again, they need to spin in another direction and change the entire direction of their franchise, which is now currently, let's compete now, look for great opportunities, and then build this young core alongside these guys. But yeah, that was kind of a long-winded way to say I'm not sure that had anything to do with Isaiah Thomas's future, and it was just Danny Ainge evaluating the draft a little bit differently than other people did, and trying to capitalize where on the scouting that they've done, and dropping the number 3 and taking a guy that they think has a similar upside to Fultz, while also getting a future lottery pick.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Part of that is me just believing that, whoever told Adam Himmelsbach that like the backcourt situation had a say in it. I believe Adam, full stop.
Yeah, but also, like, you could still have that as a consideration.
Yeah.
And it's not the main consideration. And
sure.
to me, like, yes, Avery Bradley's a good player. Yes, Marcus Smart is a great defender. Yes, like, there are parts of the Celtics backcourt that you like. It's not like those guys, Avery Bradley and Marcus Smart, are like great players you have to hold on to. And I do think you're going to lose one of those guys. And so Fultz, to me, it would have been nice knowing that you're not going to be able to pay all of those guys to have another guard come in and replenish the talent there. So I don't know. To me, the crowded backcourt, if that was a major consideration, it's just weird to me.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
I don't think you pass on a guy because you have one great scorer, one great defender, one great scorer, and 2 great defenders in the backcourt.
Sure. No, I think that makes sense. You're forgetting all-star guard Terry Rozier, though.
He had a nice playoffs.
He did. He's a good player, I think.
I was harsh on him during the regular season, and I think for pretty good reason. His shooting percentages were dismal, but he had a really good playoffs, promising playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about Jaylen Brown. I think a lot of people were taken aback when the Celtics took Jaylen Brown last season. I had Jaylen at number 5 on my board. I thought he was right in the mix for the Celtics, down to it. I wasn't really all that shocked whenever they made the pick. I would have taken Dragan Bender, but I understand the fact that they wanted a guy that maybe might actually be able to step on a floor his rookie year. With Brown, what did you think of that pick last year? And did he exceed? Did he kind of live up? Did he, I guess, underwhelm in terms of what his expectations were for you?
So my thing last year was I saw the upside there. Obviously, he's a super athletic guy. He's a strong guy. He shows flashes of handling the ball. He has a lot of skills and talents that you like in a player. My worry at number 3 when they picked Jaylen Brown last year was the flop potential and the bust potential. And I thought there was a bust potential there because, statistically he had a bad freshman year at Cal. There's no other way to put it. He wasn't efficient. He didn't have the statistical profile of a normal lottery pick. I don't even think a normal first-round pick, really. I think Kevin Pelton had him at like super low.
So let me go to bat for Jaylen Brown in his college year. He played with Konzo Martin. End of me going to bat about Jaylen Brown during his college year.
I understand the fit, but also like when you're drafting a guy at 3, and there are the red flags of the statistical profile, and there are the red flags, I think, about decision making, and he like even defensively, like theoretically, he's a great defender, but he didn't have the blocks and the steals of a guy who like is an automatic great defender. So
let me again go to bat for Jaylen Brown there, and I'm not arguing with you when I say this. I'm just trying to provide context about why his statistical profile was as bad as it is, because you're right, it really wasn't great, but contextually there were issues there. So Cal's defense under Cuonzo Martin was one of the most conservative defensive structures in the entire NBA or in the entire college basketball ecosystem. When you have Jaylen Brown, Ty Wallace, Jordan Matthews, Ivan Rabb, and Jabari Bird, and you run a fucking pack-it-in conservative scheme, I don't know what the fuck you're doing. It's dumb as fuck, but like it's what they did. They were 347th that year out of 351 teams in turnover percentage, which, you know, what are you doing when you have a team that can get out and run and you can, hopefully get transition buckets for an offense that was extraordinarily dismal, I would say. Why would you not just try and get out and get easy buckets with your athleticism? They didn't do that, though, for whatever reason. I don't know why. The things with Jaylen offensively, they had no offensive spacing. Jabari Bird was hurt for a little bit of that year, if I remember correctly. Sam Singer was a really bad shooter. Jaylen obviously was not a great shooter. Ty Wallace is a disaster from behind the three-point line. Ivan Rabb can't shoot. The only guy that they really had consistently spacing the floor for them was Jordan Matthews. There are a lot of factors basically as to why Jaylen Brown would not have been as statistically solvent as what you would expect. No space, so the turnover rate skyrocketed. Conservative defense, so the block and steal rates weren't high. You know, true shooting percentage, again, no space to operate, so he ended up not being able to finish at the rim as effectively as possible. One big thing, though, is that he drew fouls. The athleticism on the floor, you could see it when you watch the tape, right? Like, you could see it that he was more athletic than everyone on the floor. He drew 7 fouls per 40 minutes his freshman year at Cal, and, you know, that's an extraordinarily high rate. I believe it was like top 30 in all of college basketball that season. So the shooting was a worry, but he's 6'7", 7-foot wingspan, ridiculous athlete. I had him at 5 on my board. Like I totally bought into it.
Yeah, and I see why you buy into him, but still, like there wasn't anything he had proven to me about being a great wing. Like he hadn't proven that he was going to be a solid defender at the very least. He hadn't proven that he could shoot. He hadn't proven he was a good decision maker. Like that to me was why I thought he had bust potential coming out of college, and why I probably wouldn't, or I definitely wouldn't have drafted him number 3. After his rookie season, that bust potential is gone. Like he proved that he can play minutes on a winning team. He showed far more as a low post scorer than I anticipated him doing. Like the Celtics would run plays for him in the post, and especially when he had somewhat of a mismatch, and it didn't always take like a huge mismatch. He could punish guys. So I love that. I still don't know what type of player he will be offensively. I still don't know if his shooting, which was pretty good during his rookie season, is real, and how good a shooter he will become. I think ultimately that will go a long way toward deciding what type of player he becomes. I think ultimately whether he becomes, you know, this face-up scorer, or, you know, does he become a pick-and-roll creator, there's like enough ball-handling creativity that there are a lot of different ways his career could go and his offensive game could evolve that I think will ultimately dictate how great a player he becomes or how good a player he becomes. But I think it's clear after his rookie season that he's going to become at least good. And so all the worries about him busting they're not there anymore to me. Like he was playing minutes against LeBron in the playoffs, holding his own at times. He was like, and he's a gamer and he's tough. And everybody you talk to in the Celtics organization, he loves basketball. He loves to work.
Yep.
He's not a guy who's going to derail his own career by making bad decisions or not working hard enough. Like he's a guy you can trust. He is going to put in the work and get better, and get with all of his physical tools. Like that's really promising.
Yeah, I love the idea of a backcourt or a front court. I'm sorry, with he and Jaylen Brown. That is, oh my God, Jaylen Brown with Jason Tatum. Be like the JJ front court. Apparently, I love that idea because they're both incredibly hard workers. In the modern NBA, they both have great size, great length, interesting athleticism in that Jaylen's a little bit more explosive. Jason's a little bit more fluid and coordinated and, more of a long jumper than a high jumper, quote unquote. I love the way that those two guys could complement each other. I think that they're very interesting players to potentially put next to one another.
Yeah, and that's part of what the Celtics will be looking at. Although obviously, I think still, if you're drafting at number 3, it's more about talent and how you project a player to become rather than fit with your roster, especially given the way the Celtics roster is, where everybody is an asset. Like we were just talking about Isaiah Thomas, second-team All-NBA, whether they should consider trading him at some point. So obviously all these guys are assets. Obviously the roster could shift in any number of ways. But yeah, like Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Josh Jackson too, although I don't think the fit with Brown and Jackson would be quite as strong just because there's a chance neither of those guys becomes a good shooter. And I trust Tatum's jumper more than I trust those other two guys, I think. At least Jackson. So, yeah, that duo definitely would be entertaining. And like you said about Jaylen being a hard worker and Tatum being a hard worker, that stuff's important. Yep. And the Celtics have put a lot of faith into that. And obviously, like there's a culture there of guys who have chips on their shoulders, of guys who always strive to improve, and that's really, really important to them. And I think one of the reasons why they picked Jaylen Brown as high as they did last season. Yeah, no, I think you're right there. Rapid fire, I want to run through some guys where the Celtics have some decisions to make this offseason. Jae Crowder, do you believe he will be a Boston Celtic next season? Yes. Has 3 years left on his deal, I believe? Yeah, and I think that's why you keep him, because if you are trying to go out and trade for these pieces, unless a team specifically asks for him, then his contract is really valuable because it's such a valuable deal for a longer-term period of time than all of his teammates. Yeah, he is right around, I believe, $25 million owed to him over 3 years, which for his value, providing excellent two-way play, 14 points a game, 40% from three, ridiculous value. That is one of the best contracts in the entire NBA. Anyone that is like trying to like trade their star to Boston, I think should be asking for Jae Crowder. Yeah, and at the same time, we were talking about how their salary might skyrocket. So keeping a guy like Jae Crowder around to kind of supplement the rest of that roster with a more cheap and inexpensive guy will be critical to Boston. So I think he stays. But as you said, other teams will definitely be asking about him. Yeah, that's a really great point. Kelly Olynyk, to get max cap space this summer, they have to eventually rescind Kelly Olynyk's qualifying offer. Do you believe that they will offer Kelly Olynyk a qualifying offer at the very least and retain his restricted free agency rights? Yes, I do. I think they'll do that, and then see how the landscape develops, and if they need to, then rescind that and go in a different direction. Obviously, he's not going to keep them from going after Gordon Hayward or Blake Griffin. Like if you can get one of those guys to commit, yes, you get rid of Kelly Olynyk. But if you can keep him, and restricted free agency is always weird. Like you talk to a lot of people, they think he'll be worth like 10 to 14 million. But restricted free agency, you never know how that's going to go. You never know where the money's going to go. Like all it would take is the Brooklyn Nets to come in and be like, yeah, you know what, we want to stretch 5. And Kelly Olynyk's there, and we think we can lure him away. So here's his deal. We'll overpay him. And at the other end of that, it could be, all the money dries up, and the Celtics whiff on their top free agent targets, and Olynyk kind of comes back with his tail in between his legs, and the Celtics get him on a great deal. So restricted free agency, you just never know. Yeah, that's a really great point. If I had to ballpark his money, I would say like $444 right now. Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah.
Marcus Smart, they're going to have a chance to extend him this summer and, going into October, late season. It's obviously going to depend a lot on what ends up happening with their money in free agency, but do you think that they will pursue an extension with Marcus Smart, and what do you think the value of said extension could look like?
I don't think they'll pursue an extension with him, unless they have their roster set. And I don't know. To me, they've always put off those decisions, and in the past it's been to maintain flexibility, and maybe they won't have that with him. But given the kind of fluidity of their roster, I think it might make more sense to just kind of keep him restricted. And given how much other talent they have already and how much other talent they could go out and acquire this summer, I don't think you run the risk of him having this awesome year where he's going to drive up his value something insane. So I'd be really surprised if they do ink him to an extension. I think that's a decision that they'll make in the future. And he's another guy like Avery Bradley. He could be traded to clear cap space for one of those top targets.
Yep, absolutely.
It's also incredible how much depends on the salary cap that comes in. If the salary cap comes in a little higher than expected, the Celtics will be so happy.
Oh, yeah, because the trade for number 3 going down from number 1, it actually opens up $1.4 million in cap space.
Yeah.
That's actually really important given the fact that they might only be $700,000 away from that.
Yeah, and then if they get another couple million, if the salary cap rises another couple million unexpectedly,
yep,
then they'll be rejoicing because then they won't have to move as many pieces and they won't have to shake up the rest of their roster quite as much. And maybe that allows them to bring in Yabusele or whatever it allows them to do. There are other options that they'll have if they get that extra couple $1 million. It seems like a small amount, but it's really big the way they've put together their roster. They're really squeezed to get max cap space if they do get a top free agent.
Terry Rozier, do you believe he will be a Boston Celtic next year?
That's entirely depends on everything else.
Yep.
I don't think he's a guy they're basing their decisions on. I do think they probably value him a little more highly than most organizations. But if he needs to go in a trade, they'll put him in a trade. It's I don't know, 50-50?
And then Jonas Jerebko, Gerald Green.
Probably more 75-25, 75 stay. Because trades are more unlikely to happen. But
that's true.
It won't be a sticking point. Terry Rozier won't be a sticking point on a big deal. Let's put it that way. If he needs to go, they'll let him go.
Yeah. Before the number 1 overall pick trade, where they were going to end up with Markelle Fultz, I would have gone the other way. I would have said 75% that he's gone. But I feel like that trade actually opens up a lot of space for him on the roster.
Yeah, as you said, if they got him and then they kept, one of Avery Bradley or Marcus Smart at least, then it's Isaiah Thomas, Markelle Fultz, Avery Bradley.
Yep.
And you don't have much need for Terry Rozier. But now, if you pick a wing, now Terry Rozier might have a bigger role because you don't have that super prospect at point guard.
Yep. Jonas Jerebko, Gerald Green, Tyler Zeller, any of them back next season?
I'd be surprised if any of them are back.
Yeah, no, that's not really a shocker to me. Tyler Zeller at least is under contract. He has a non-guaranteed, $8 million or whatever. They're going to, I think, probably decline that at some point.
Yeah, or he'll be in a trade or whatever the case, but it would be pretty stunning if he's still around, to me.
Yeah, no, I think I would agree with that. All right. The last thing I want to ask you about here, Ante Zizic and Gershon Yabusele. where are you at with those guys? I mean, Ante is a guy that I'm a huge fan of. I think he's going to be a really good player. I had him at number 14 on my board coming into last year's NBA draft. Yabusele, I'm less high on. What do you believe that the Celtics have in terms of their plans for them?
I think Zizic will be on the team next year. I think Yabu's future is more up in the air. I think Zizic will give them rebounding right away. I think the fact that he had kind of a dominant season in Croatia and then after the move to the EuroLeague was
equally as
very
good.
Productive. Yeah, very very productive in the second best league in the world. It bodes well, especially at his age. Bodes well for his future. I still think there are some questions about his mobility and how he fits. And like if you look at today's NBA, like big men have to be shot blockers. They have to be, great rebounders. They have to be able to defend the arc. They have to do a lot of things. I'm not sure he checks all of those boxes, but I do think he'll score efficiently, and I do think he'll rebound at the NBA. So I think he's a rotation big man early in his career with the potential to develop maybe into more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's about right. The last thing we're going to leave this on, Ryan Russillo just tweeted, "No one will believe this, but just got off the phone with a source that said LeBron camp was surprised Griff was out."
Ooh.
That doesn't say that this entire thing was the biggest shit show that I have ever seen in my life as a front office, just tear down. I don't know what is, because that is shocking. That is unbelievably dumb.
And then there are the other reports that they were working on trades all day, and then he decided tonight that he was out.
Unbelievable. Yikes. Just totally yikes. Jay, tell the people where they can find your work. Tell the people where to follow you on social media. Tell them about your podcast. Do it all now.
So I write to find my writing, masslive.com/Celtics, to find my terrible tweets, @ByJayKing, ByJayKing. My podcast, Locked On Celtics Podcast. Search for that wherever you listen to podcasts.
Jay is one of my favorite guys on the beat of any team in the NBA. He is one of the most fun follows. He's one of the most engaging people that you'll find on Twitter. And he is a really interesting writer, kind of covering the beat from a little bit of a different manner than the typical beat writer. I enjoy that creativity. I enjoy Jay. You should all follow him over at @ByJayKing, and you should follow his podcast, the Locked On Celtics podcast. This has been the Game Theory Podcast, though. You can subscribe to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Android, anywhere that you can get podcasts. I am sure we are up on right now. We are powered by CLNS Media. This is our last podcast before the NBA draft. I hope that you guys all really enjoy it. We're going to have a post-NBA draft show hours after the event ends with Chris Stone and I. I believe it's going to be Chris. Hopefully by me promising you Chris and I, that will get Chris to make sure and confirm that he's going to go ahead and do this with me. You'll have that up Thursday night going into Friday morning. Thank you all for listening this week. I really appreciate everyone who has taken the time. Until next time, though, we will talk soon. Bye.